on the 20th century, the raging Inferno of Volcanoes. Mount St Helens erupts in May of 1980, killing more than 55 people in the worst volcanic eruption in U.S. history. In Hawaii, Kilauea Volcano has been erupting since 1983. Volcanoes are spectacular reminders of how the Earth was formed. But volcanoes can also be deadly killers.
Nature, you can't stop nature.
I'm Mike Wallace, and this is the 20th century. Volcanoes are as old as the Earth itself. They can lie dormant for centuries, but in a moment they can come alive, wreaking death and destruction. That was the case on May 18, 1980, when Mount St. Helens exploded in the most destructive eruption in U.S. history.
The eruption began at 8:39 a.m. and shot 60,000 feet into the air. During the eruption, explosions rocked the mountain and could be heard as far as 200 miles away.
The entire top of the mountain, of course, is blowing consistently, probably since about 8:30 this morning when the first eruptions occurred.
Everybody out!
Bridges were swept away when gigantic mudslides came pouring out of the volcano. Trees were knocked over like matchsticks by a flow of mud that scientists said had the consistency of wet cement. Dozens of homes were simply inundated by the mud. Many residents lost everything. 11 million young salmon were lost at this fish hatchery along the Green River, and the latest estimate is as many as 3,000 persons have been evacuated from the area.
The fact is, volcanoes like Mount St. Helens can be both devastating and, ironically, constructive. Most of the continents on Earth were created by volcanoes.
Currently in the Pacific, we have many islands that are solely there because they're volcanic. Most of the time when we talk about volcanic activity, we're talking about the ring of fire, which circles the Pacific Ocean. If we start at the end of South America, we can move along the volcanic chain up through Central America, on along North America, down through the Aleutian chain, through Japan and the Philippines, around Australia and back down along the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And this makes a complete necklace or ring of active volcanoes.
Most volcanic activity, though, occurs underwater.
Scientists in recent years have discovered that about 80% of the magma and lava, the molten rock that comes to the surface of the Earth, actually does this under the oceans.
Dick Fisk is a volcanologist with the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History.
Underwater eruptions, if the situation is right, can produce islands or land. Of course, all the Hawaiian islands, for example, are the direct result of volcanoes that started growing on the ocean floor.
In a million years, we should have a new Hawaiian island. We already have a name for it. It's called Loihi. Submarines go down to grab samples, and we've looked at it. It's very similar to the big island of Hawaii, but it's a fresh new baby island forming.
But because they're so unpredictable, volcanoes have wreaked havoc throughout history. Many believe that the fabled island of Atlantis, an advanced civilization that the Greek philosopher Plato described as morally excellent and physically beautiful, was wiped out by a volcano. And the ancient Roman city of Pompeii was buried and preserved by Mount Vesuvius' sudden eruption.
It looked this way until the day in the year 79 AD, when, in the words of Roman author Pliny the Younger, day became darker and denser than any night. Vesuvius had laid waste to Pompeii. 25,000 people were buried under volcanic ash.
It was an explosion, and for 3 days and 3 nights, just rainstorms. And the people could see the stones outside of the houses, but they couldn't see the poisonous gases.
2 million tourists who visit Pompeii and Vesuvius every year don't see danger either, nor do they feel the daily earth tremors. But experts who monitor them believe the nightmare of Pompeii is due to recur.
That nightmare has occurred again and again around the world, in places like Krakatoa in Indonesia.
That was the site of a very famous eruption in 1883. a large eruption, and that was noticed around the world. It killed 36,000 people were killed in nearby areas, largely by tidal waves. The ocean came ashore because of the volcano.
Volcanic eruptions have often turned out to be lethal because so many people have been attracted, as farmers, to the rich soil along the mountainside.
There is a sweet side in the sense that volcanoes, in many cases, are very desirable places to live. The sour side is that volcanoes erupt from time to time, and the people who are living there then must face the consequences of the volcano renewing itself, building new land, producing new ash, new soil for future crops. And if you're living there and trying to operate a farm, this can be very, very dangerous, if not, absolutely life-threatening.
That was the case in Colombia in 1985.
There is a scene of immense human tragedy, awesome physical destruction this morning. It is in a coffee farming area in Colombia. Where the town of Armero used to be, there is now a slab of mud, this caused by the eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano.
Picture a fairly well-off town in rural Colombia, the commercial center of a region where the soil was rich and the cattle were fat. The town, Armero, was built along a river that flowed down from a volcano. People would picnic on the river. And it was down that riverbed that the tons of mud cascaded. It moved faster than most of the people could run. There was so much that the church, which stood in the center of the town, disappeared.
There was a lot of snow and ice up at the summit of this volcano, and the heat from the erupted material melted water, melted the ice and snow, and this produced a huge mud flow that traveled many miles down the river canyon and destroyed a nearby town, killing more than 20,000 people.
They have already buried scores of bodies from this week's avalanche in Chinchina, on the other side of the volcano from Armero, where as many as 20,000 might have died.
Como si viniera la tierra dando vueltas.
One survivor from here said it was like the world was upside down. It was unimaginable.
Isidro Bojorquez was trapped for almost 4 days. Most of his family died near him. Rescuers have seen other trapped people die before they could be gotten out. But this afternoon, they beat the clock, and before injuries and exhaustion killed him, they saved Isidro Bojorquez.
Volcanoes are literally cracks in the Earth's crust, windows on Earth's molten core.
A volcano is a mountain that results from the eruption of material, either lava flows or particles of ash pile up around a vent, a hole in the earth where the lava comes out.
Volcanoes result from the collision of continental and oceanic plates, enormous pieces of the Earth's crust. The resulting pressure and high temperatures cause a chain reaction.
Molten rock is formed underground, and geologists call that molten rock magma while it's still underground. When it emerges at the surface at a volcano, then we call it lava.
Pressures force the magma from deep inside the Earth to rise to the surface, along with a variety of gases.
And of course, when you take the top off of a bottle of pop, especially if it's warm and you've shaken it, the bubbles form and it erupts. In the same way that gases come out of magma as it rises towards the surface, and that can cause an extra kicker in the eruption, because literally the lava is frothing, it's bubbling as it comes out.
And just like a shaken bottle of soda, magma from deep inside the Earth exploded at Mount St Helens in Washington on May 18, 1980, the worst volcanic eruption in U.S. history, leaving behind wreckage that looked almost like a nuclear war zone.
Mount St Helens was a sleeping volcano, and many people living in the Pacific Northwest probably did not expect that it would return to activity.
But it did. In March of 1980, the volcano began to rumble.
Before an eruption, there's usually earthquakes associated with the magma moving. We often see a change in the land.
We're seeing a large cavity 200 to 300 feet across. We do have a live volcano. Whether it will get bigger or stop at this point, we do not know.
Numerous small earthquakes occurred inside the volcano, and steam and a small amount of ash was erupted.
Those small eruptions continued into April, creating an instant tourist attraction.
We have an eruption at this point, and it's rising. We're getting continuous eruptions at this point of ash material being thrown into the air. Look at that go. There it comes again. What a beautiful sight.
It was something to see, all right. An obscure mountain in the northwest Cascades suddenly changing its character. It rumbled and groaned and then brought forth a happening.
It was an awesome sight, what one geologist called the birth of a volcano. Puffs of acrid smoke spewed out rocks and formed a 300-foot-wide crater. Ash dusted the pristine snow atop the 9,000-foot-high mountain. Huge fissures appeared. At least one expert reported lava near the surface, and the crater continued to grow as its sides caved in.
We assume that there's actually magma moving up under the volcano somewhere at some depth. How high, how much, that's purely speculative.
Geologists and Forest Service officials continued to monitor the volcano, which is still shooting plumes of steam and ash high into the sky. More seismic instruments were planted on the mountain's side to get a better idea of what's going on. Though the experts concede there is really no way to predict what will happen next, a more violent eruption or a sudden return to dormancy.
From April to mid-May, the mountain continued to rumble, emitting puffs of ash. Nonetheless, people living near the volcano didn't seem to be worried.
Cougar has always been in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. It's located about 12 miles that way. And people here always knew the volcano could erupt. So what has been a surprise to some is taken pretty much in stride here. The 100 residents with a streak of backwoods independence aren't leaving.
If they came running out here and told you to get out of the way, that something was happening, you suppose you'd go?
Oh, sure, I'd go then.
But until then?
Oh, until then, I'm not going to be worried about it.
At the cafe, Mount St. Helens is celebrated in paintings on circular lumber saw blades. And you get a little volcano philosophy with a strong coffee.
I really don't know what it could do to Cougar. It could put it on the map, or it could take it off the map. Either way.
But then, on May 18th, the volcano exploded.
This sequence of photos was taken during the first 60 seconds of the mountain's eruption, beginning shortly after 8:30 on Sunday morning.
Pressure caused by the rising magma inside the volcano had pushed out a huge bulge in the side of the mountain. That bulge collapsed into an avalanche, followed by an explosion.
When you move something that's nearly the size of a square mile, you set up a huge wind or force that started to lay down the trees, and then right after it came this very hot blast of material with sharp projectiles going on a ballistic trajectory, pelting everything. And so this huge area was just laid waste or devastated, flattened.
A pilot who surveyed the damage at Mount St. Helens in Washington State yesterday said it looks like the aftermath of an atomic explosion. The whole north face of the mountain has been blown away. Today, volcanic ash from the mountain is blowing over 5 states. A mile-wide wall of mud is tumbling down the mountainside. At least 5 people are known dead. 21 more are missing.
Ash is drifting northeast of the volcano toward eastern Washington, Oregon, and western Idaho. Visibility in towns like Ellensburg, Washington have been reduced to near zero because of heavy ash fallout.
Midnight came at noon in Yakima, Washington, as tons of ash erupting from Mount St. Helens swept over a large portion of the northwest. The fallout blocked visibility completely in some areas, creating an eerie darkness. Mud flows from the volcano caused flooding in the Toutle River. A wall of water as high as 20 feet in some places swept logs down the river with explosive force. Several bridges were destroyed.
More than 55 people died as a result of the eruption, including the entire Seibold family.
It was the beauty of Mount St. Helens that lured the Seibold family to it again and again. But last Sunday, the mountain they loved so much brought death to Barbara Seibold, her husband Ron, and their 2 children, 9-year-old Michelle and 7-year-old Kevin.
Just a week before the eruption, Elise Harrington, a friend of the Seibolds, had climbed Mount St. Helens with them.
Ron used to climb that mountain, and I don't know exactly how many times he climbed it, but then he got Barbara and the kids interested in it, and they like to go hiking up there, and lately they had been going back and forth so they could see how the volcano was changing, how the mountain was changing, and they just took lots of pictures. he thought we had, you know, that it was safe, that there would be no problems. We had plenty of time to get out.
But there wasn't enough time. The eruption was so sudden. The Seibolds were trapped. Rescue helicopters sighted their bodies in their car on Sunday, but had to move on in search of survivors. The next day, another eruption. The car is now buried under 100 feet of mud and ash.
The Seibolds were not the only casualties.
Harry Truman was the old man of the mountain. He refused to leave his cabin on the side of Mount St. Helens when it began erupting in March.
Spirit Lake and Mount St. Helens is my life, folks. I've lived there 50 years. It's a part of me. That mountain and that lake is a part of Truman, and I'm a part of it.
Today, his friends and relatives held a memorial service for Harry Truman, whose cabin was covered by more than 100 feet of ash and rock. He was 84.
Frequently, rescuers could only guess that the eruption had claimed other victims from the evidence they'd left behind.
There is no sign of life near this camper vehicle, which apparently took a direct hit when Mount St. Helens erupted.
Looks like a rig got blown over, blown apart, and burned up. Any evidence of any people? There's a dog up there, probably 30 yards above the truck. But no evidence of the owner? No. Haven't found anything yet.
The remains of a dog are spotted up the hill from the camper, and searchers theorize it wouldn't have been out here alone, so there must be at least one adult buried here somewhere, and perhaps even a child. A toy pistol is spotted among the debris only a few feet from the vehicle. But a painstaking search fails to turn up any leads. Higher up the hill, another vehicle is spotted, a car with all its windows blown out, the keys still in the ignition, but no sign of life. Just an eerie stillness. Not far away, one searcher finds what's left of a parka, but nothing more.
Even a volcano expert from the U.S. Geological Survey was killed, for the explosion was far bigger than he had expected. His observation post was too close for safety.
The size of the May 18th explosion surprised the experts, and geologists like Tim Haight are quick to admit that science is still in its infancy in understanding volcanoes. And he was amazed at the magnitude of the destruction.
This area must resemble the desolation of the moon. It must have been an absolute muddy slurry when it came into this position.
President Carter declared a federal disaster, and he flew to inspect the damage.
The president spent about half an hour flying over the worst part of the devastated area, got within 2 miles of Mount St. Helens itself before being forced back by bad weather. Landing at the town of Kelso, Washington, Mr. Carter said the scene he had witnessed was almost indescribable.
I've never seen or heard of anything like this before. Somebody said it looked like a moonscape, but the moon looks like a golf course compared to what's up there. The devastation there is probably much more complete than I had ever dreamed.
The whole north side of the volcano was blown away in what scientists call a lateral blast, an explosion so powerful it left this horseshoe crater, a mile from rim to rim, 3,000 feet deep. Geologists calculate that nearly a cubic mile of the mountain was obliterated, leaving this spectacular gap on the top and miles of devastation down below.
Scientists now estimate that the explosion of Mount St. Helens Sunday was 2,500 times as powerful as the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
That was just the first eruption. More kept coming.
This latest eruption, the third in less than a month, was accompanied by an earthquake measuring 3.2 on the Richter scale. It sent a huge dark plume of ash more than 50,000 feet into the atmosphere, spreading a blizzard of fallout over hundreds of square miles last night.
The ash mixed with rain in Portland, where reduced visibility forced the closing of the city's international airport.
The speed limit is set at 15 miles an hour, an attempt to reduce the amount of ash kicked up by traffic. And many residents still are not taking any chances, including this Sunday morning jogger.
Visibility was no better, hundreds of miles away.
At times, the highway would literally disappear in a thick cloud of volcanic ash. Journeying ahead was made even more difficult because of the scores of abandoned vehicles left on the roadside. Hundreds of drivers forced to seek shelter after their automobiles just quit running, engines clogged with ash.
The town of Ritzville, Washington, helped hundreds of stranded travelers.
They were great. They were pretty good, really. They were great. They put us up in the church for a while, and then last time was the first time we slept in a motel, so it was pretty good.
How does it feel to be getting out of here?
Great. It was really great. I can't wait. I can't wait to get back to Seattle. I don't think I'll ever leave.
What's next? Well, for the Ritzville residents, some of whom were left standing ankle deep in volcanic dust, it's time to dig out. Mayor Kirk Danicus is optimistic his town will be able to pull through this very unusual dilemma.
You know, this is going to be something that tell our grandkids about, and I would just like to go to sleep tonight and wake up in the morning and it'd all disappear, but it isn't going to happen that way.
In fact, the ash from Mount St. Helens kept on creating problems.
Another impact of the ash fallout, an electrical power outage in Kelso, Washington. This small hotel had to use candlelight to serve weary travelers. There were no streetlights. Authorities sent out warnings to the elderly and those with respiratory problems to stay inside and not breathe the dust.
Hidden behind billowing clouds and boiling steam, Mount St. Helens keeps its secrets well. Geologists don't know how long the steam and ash and the chance of more massive eruptions will go on.
After 2 quiet months, the Mount St. Helens volcano erupted last night and this morning. Blasts of steam and ash more than 9 miles into the sky fed a light dusting of Portland, Oregon, 50 miles to the southeast. Rocks the size of chicken eggs fell nearer the volcano. No one's sure what the latest explosion means, but when the volcano talks these days, scientists listen.
Mount St. Helens erupted at least 20 more times in the next 12 years. But never with the magnitude of the May 18th explosion. For those living on Mount St. Helens, the challenge became how to turn devastation into rebirth.
Plants and animals are coming back, and they're coming back fast. There are lots of plants. Seeds are carried in by animals. Some seeds actually sprouted up through the thin layer of ash. And so vegetation is returning, and the animals are returning.
But it didn't happen right away. The explosion had covered everything with mud and ash.
This must be something of what hell looks like. It crushed or burned or buried every living thing for an area of 150 square miles.
But only 4 months after the devastation, there were already signs of life.
It was, we thought, incredible what we found just 5 miles from the volcano's crater and in the area hardest hit by the blast and burning winds that had followed. Most of this is fireweed, so called because it's the first growth to come back after a forest fire. The hardy shrub has spread among the barren hills, splashing color across the gray volcanic ash. There are trees, too, some perhaps a century old, until the eruption always stunted under the dense growth of bigger evergreens. Those bigger trees were destroyed, but these somehow survived and now flourish.
But other areas of Mount St. Helens weren't so lucky.
There is an area close into the volcano that's still very sterile. There's no soil. It's going to take a long time for the natural processes to bring plant life back and then animal life.
Key highways are still washed out, and temporary bridges have not withstood this spring's runoff, rivers whose courses were changed by the eruption. And yet, young and old have learned to live with the inconveniences and the uncertainties. The mountain can blow up again, as it did repeatedly in the 1830s. Then it had an Indian name, Lewitt, the Lady of Fire.
But the danger that the Lady of Fire might blow again didn't seem to scare many of the residents nearby.
It might get a little rough, but it makes it more exciting. It's more adventure to it.
Gary Carey, who has lived here with his mother and a brother for 6 years and enjoys the solitude, has resisted efforts by local authorities to move him to a safer place.
Legally, they can't keep me out.
Helen O'Blennis lives here with her dogs, cats, chickens, turkeys, and ducks, not to mention a herd of wild elk that roams just on the other side of the hill. She will not move out, no matter what the danger might be.
I'm not really afraid of it. You're going to go one way or the other, so I love it up here. I really do.
And you're not afraid of that mountain erupting again?
No, I'm not a bit afraid of it.
Even people whose homes were wiped out by the volcano didn't seem to be frightened.
I worked around that miserable thing when I was a youngster. And, of course, I knew that there would be a volcano there again one of these days. but I didn't think it happened during my time.
Norbert Bouchard was pretty well flooded out by the mountain, but he's putting in a new foundation and starting over, despite all the mud on his front lawn.
This mud just looked like somebody had a big old concrete mixer. Look there, it packs just like cement.
The funny thing is, though, as Mr. Bouchard has discovered, there's something special about that mud.
I got me a garden going out there. I got peas up this high, onions. I got apple trees that's just so loaded out there. It'll be flat. That apple tree likes this stuff.
The fertile ash helps the mountain regenerate. In fact, in 50 years, there may be no sign that Mount St. Helens exploded.
And this is part of the problem, because in 50 years, probably most of the area devastated will be standing forests of trees. And that will probably result in people forgetting how dangerous the volcano really is.
But people didn't forget the eruption right away. In fact, just a year after the explosion, the eruption was being used in campaigns to promote tourism there.
Through the weekend, there have been parades and celebrations like this one in Castle Rock to remind and remember this one-year anniversary. Little fairs did a brisk business in volcano ash souvenirs, in T-shirts and records.
There are two bulbs inside, one's red and one's green. As they flash, it makes it look as if the volcano is exploding.
How much?
$39.95.
The tourists came for the first anniversary of the start of the momentous eruption, but the volcano's new shape was shrouded.
Right in there, just goes up like that. As soon as the clouds go away, we'll be able to see the top.
At many a cafe and bar, volcano fans pass the day and wait. Who knows, she might explode again. Geologists say that's always possible, though this is a dormant period. On the bus for tourists, there's a video pre-recorded clear day picture and a rerun of the eruption itself.
Even 2 years after the blast, tourists were still coming, trying to get a glimpse of the famous mountain.
There is more than volcano land, crater tacos, dome builder burgers, T-shirts, and other sideshow attractions awaiting the visitor to Mount St. Helens this summer. For now, playing in the main tent is the volcano itself. For the first time, a record number of tourists are getting in close by helicopter, plane, and now even by car.
To me, it's just mind-boggling. Every place I looked, I thought, this couldn't be real, it couldn't happen, yet it did.
It's estimated that about 1 million people will visit Mount St. Helens during 1982, but Washington state officials are disappointed with that figure. They believe that it could attract 3 times that number.
Visibility is often poor here, and another factor keeping would-be tourists away is a concern that the mountain has not gone back to sleep. Recently, there was another spectacular dome-building eruption.
Well, what do you think about being this close?
Scary. What if something happens?
I don't know. Looks to me like it's kind of dangerous.
Although officials say there is no cause for alarm, warning signs and evacuation routes are posted, a reminder that lives were lost here. A museum opened near Tootle, part of a fast-growing tourist industry. Here, some of the burned-out cars and homage to Harry Truman, who refused to leave his home on the mountain and died there.
Well, the very first thing that I bought was Harry Truman's bar. And Harry's back there sitting at the bar, looking out at the mountain that he loved.
When the mountain Harry Truman loved exploded, it spewed ash and lava and smoke, the most visible effects of any volcanic eruption. But they are hardly its only effects. Large volcanic eruptions, like the one in Indonesia early in the 19th century, can disrupt weather patterns around the world.
In 1815, there was a huge eruption of Tambora volcano. It actually changed the weather. In 1816, it was known as the year without a summer. In New England, there were snowstorms and hailstorms in July, destroying crops. England and parts of Europe also suffered the same fate from this huge eruption.
If ash from a volcanic eruption like Mount St. Helens is thrown high enough into the atmosphere, it can block sunlight, and the result is a cooling effect that can lower global temperatures.
During the 1800s, it's believed that the atmosphere cooled down a degree or maybe even 1.5 degrees because of the volcanic activity during that period of time.
Since then, science has gotten better at predicting a volcano's effect on the weather, and science's ability to predict a pickup in volcanic activity has improved dramatically. But so far, science has been unable to predict just when a mountain will explode.
We may forecast it within a time frame, 3 to 5 days or 2 weeks or a month, but there's no way at this point to know exactly when a volcano is going to erupt. Volcanoes that are being most closely watched are Mount Shasta in Northern California, Hood in Oregon, and Mount Rainier in Washington State. And with Rainier and Shasta and Hood and yet the rest of that chain, at any time they could erupt. They could erupt now, today.
And so what we've learned, the main lesson of Mount St. Helens, is that those volcanoes, all of them out there, are going to erupt again. And thus we have to understand them better, hopefully to anticipate when these next eruptions will take place.
For those who study volcanoes, one of nature's great laboratories is Kilauea Volcano on the island of Hawaii. Unlike Mount St. Helens, it doesn't erupt violently, doesn't cause deadly mudslides. Rather, it oozes and spurts slow-moving molten lava, allowing scientists to observe its activity up close, especially since January 3rd, 1983, when Kilauea erupted with spectacular lava fountains. And more than 10 years later, it was still erupting.
Pillars of hot lava cascaded into the air for more than 11 hours before this latest episode was finally over. Rivers of glowing lava spread to the north and east as a result of the eruption. Scientists monitoring the volcano estimated it was producing 3 million cubic feet of lava each hour. Geologists from the Hawaii Volcano Observatory took lava samples and its temperature, 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit.
The volcano is easy to work on. There are not steep slopes. It's easy to get around with equipment and with people. And so many observations have been made. It erupts frequently. Eruptions can be observed and studied. And so it's a marvelous place. This is a small breakout of lava. And you'll notice the formation of typical pahoehoe lava surface. The material underneath is still fluid and moving. The crust is hard and wrinkles. It's like a rumpled tablecloth or a pile of ropes. And you see the typical ropey surface. Now this is really hot. I'm going to try to come up and poke a stick in and see if we can collect a sample. You'll get an idea how hot this is as I try to do this. There we have a little piece. Some of the newest rock on Earth.
Usually the lava flows are slow and sluggish, but in March of 1983 they suddenly picked up speed.
Fountains up to 150 feet in the air today fed the lava flow from Hawaii's spectacular Kilauea Volcano. A scientist said the resulting wall was inching down the street when all of a sudden it picked up speed and moved along like a hot mountain.
It was sometime before dawn early this morning that the massive lava flow from Kilauea finally claimed its first casualties, 2 houses in the Royal Gardens district, 3.5 miles from the crater. A huge wall of lava, 30 feet high, completely enveloped and buried them. This is one of the houses as it looked yesterday morning. This is the same spot 24 hours later. This camper trailer fell victim to the wall of lava this morning. And several other homes, some only 100 yards from the lava flow, appeared to be the next inevitable targets.
Throughout 1983, Kilauea's eruptions continued, threatening the Royal Gardens subdivision.
It has been a week now since Kilauea's latest eruption began, and geologists from the Hawaii Volcano Observatory say it is showing no sign of ending soon. Last night, the spectacular lava flow continued. It's being pumped up from nearly 2 miles underground at a rate of 1 million cubic feet an hour, forming what resembles a huge glowing lake, then spilling downward from the edge of the crater like a waterfall. The river of lava is now 4 miles long as it winds its way into the Royal Gardens area.
Because the rivers of lava generally move so slowly, usually they're not a threat to humans.
We can give people warning in housing developments that are on that island. People have 3 or 5 days of warning. They can pack up their belongings, move out, get everything out safely, They may lose their home. In some cases, they may lose their church or the grocery store, but the community of people still exists.
This house lies directly in the path of the new flow, which is now 3 miles long and less than a mile away from the development. But since it is moving so slowly, civil defense officials have not yet ordered residents of Royal Gardens to evacuate their homes. For a while, the lava remained about a mile from Royal Gardens, but just this morning it started moving rapidly. It is now coming directly down King Street, 2,000 degrees hot, and burning everything in its path. In some places, the wall of lava was 20 feet high as it moved relentlessly forward, appearing to pick up speed as it advanced. Local residents gave each other up-to-the-minute reports on CB radios.
How far on King Street has it gotten?
It's covered about 20 meters of pavement, and it's still moving rapidly.
All of a sudden, we could see her building up, and then I think just when you got here, she started coming real fast down the road.
Year after year, Kilauea kept gushing lava, threatening the surrounding area.
Hawaii's Kilauea Volcano has been lighting up the skies with a series of sporadic eruptions that began just over a year ago. But observers say this week it's putting on its biggest show. The 14th major eruption fired a fountain of molten rock up to 1,000 feet in the air.
The largest stream of molten rock had come to within 2 miles of the remote community of Royal Gardens, where residents have been evacuated 5 times since Kilauea began its eruptions a year ago.
And in 1986, people were still evacuating as Kilauea kept on erupting.
Firefighters tried gamely to stop the flow, hoping once again to spare the home of Louis Powell. Powell cleared out yesterday across a pile of lava.
It's one of those things that nature, you can't stop nature.
Jeffrey Davis took a helicopter ride to see the volcanic flood that wiped out a year of labor on his dream house and leveled the homes of 8 neighbors.
The house was just very near completion, and seeing a dream come that far, I feel thankful that at least we got to go that far.
Please leave the area due to smoke and fire hazard as the lava flow approaches this area.
Kelly McFate was one of those told to get out. He watched the approaching disaster from the roof of his house.
Still pretty scared, you know, it's still rolling pretty fast.
Evacuees took whatever they could. One woman planned to take her entire house.
Probably going to have someone come in and lift it and put it on a trailer and move it up the road.
And she did. Friends helped Cecilia Santiago save her home from the lava, moving it piece by piece.
By 1990, the effects of 7 years of continuous eruptions began to have more serious consequences.
Hawaii's governor today declared towns affected by the Kilauea volcano disaster areas. Last night, the lava set 3 more homes on fire, bringing to 115 the number of houses destroyed since 1983. For the first time since that eruption began, all area residents have been ordered to leave.
Kilauea's river of fire has sealed off the last road through Kalapana Gardens. Just about all of this community has been scorched by lava and covered with hardening black rock.
And with the unceasing lava flow, the evacuation continues. Whole houses up on blocks to be towed to safer ground. Families with their personal belongings reluctantly leaving their fiery paradise. And no longer are they termed evacuees. Officially, they are being relocated. In the molten wake of Kilauea, most residents will be unable to return. And at the historic Star of the Sea Church, a sea breeze away from the black sand beaches, what may have been the last Sunday service for some time took place this morning.
It's sad.
Because of the advancing lava, the 1930s vintage wood frame church is threatened. Building movers have volunteered to relocate the church free of charge, a move that civil defense officials say may be necessary within 10 days as the Kilauea lava flow continues to surge through the heart of this small town.
In fact, the volcano forced the church to relocate out of the way of the advancing lava.
Well, you can't control it. You can't stop it. You can't say that's far enough. So why worry about it? It's going to be, it's going to be.
The lava's inexorable flow, about 1/3 of a mile wide, moving about a foot each minute. It has paused briefly during 7 years of eruptions, but the wrath of Hawaii's so-called volcano goddess has remained focused at the same tiny communities.
Because nothing man-made seemed to do any good. people resorted to the supernatural to try to stop the lava.
So I've seen offerings of bottles of gin and money and gifts, gift-wrapped presents, you know, from a department store are thrown into the volcano, and this is done very seriously in a mood of respect.
Another ancient Hawaiian legend tells of a struggle between Pele, the volcano goddess, and her sister, the sea goddess Namaka Okahai, to account for what happens when hot lava from Kilauea meets the colder seawater of the Pacific.
It runs like syrup down the side of the volcano, all the way down, where it enters the ocean, and then what happens in most cases, this hot lava, when it meets the cold ocean, explodes into fine ash.
Like a river at flood stage, Kilauea's lava surges in ever-changing patterns as it flows 8 miles to the Pacific Ocean. Where the lava spatters into the Pacific, it has become an underwater show now. For divers, a display of aquatic pyrotechnics, as 2,000-degree lava meets 75-degree water.
And if you go near the what we call the ocean entry, places where the lava is entering the ocean, you see many small explosions and black sand is produced.
It is nature's own very turbulent hot tub, the place where Hawaii's black sand beaches are born.
By the end of 1993, 2 square kilometers had been added to the island as a result of the volcano.
We can go down and to make scientific measurements. We walk fast now. We don't want to stay there too long. But walking along the surface of this new land, the sand and whatnot is covered by younger lava flows, so it looks like solid land when you walk on it and take a photograph of it. But this is really misleading. These areas are quite dangerous.
We're looking at a river of lava flowing in a tube. And thanks to a skylight, a place where the roof of the tube has collapsed in, we can see the river of flowing lava. The lava is traveling downslope from here and will enter the ocean, pouring into the sea.
But despite all the measurements and all the tests, still scientists cannot predict just how and when a volcano will erupt.
We can say the volcano is getting ready, the conditions are right for something to happen, but as far as a hard prediction, July 17th there will be some event, this cannot be done.
Well, Mother Nature, I think, likes to fool us every time it gets a chance. We don't know everything there is to know about volcanoes, and each experience is a new learning experience. We learn more. In time, we have gotten better and better and better.
It's part of life on Earth. It's a natural part of life, and society just has to learn how to do a better job of coexisting with volcanoes. We cannot control them, we can't stop the eruptions, but perhaps we can live in more harmony with them.
Volcanoes have been an integral part of the Earth's development since the beginning of time. Volcanoes create new land. They enrich the soil, attracting farmers to their fertile slopes. But when a volcano erupts, those slopes can turn deadly in the twinkling of an eye. Too often, mankind has been reassured by the false belief that science, that man, can ameliorate the destructive natural forces of a volcano. But the fact is that volcanoes were here long before the first humans, and they'll probably be around long after the last human has disappeared from the face of the earth. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is the 20th Century.